Hey, what's up, guys? This is Adam D'Angeli from the Rescue Michigan Coalition. It's our weekly live stream, and we've got an exciting program for you tonight. Joining me live is Shane Trejo, our Chief Operations Officer, and we normally broadcast these on Saturdays, but this week we were both at the Save Our State Conference in Lansing, which was very, very exciting for us. It was in many ways like a family reunion. We got to see a lot of people that we've known over the years and also meet a lot of new ones. And so, in fact, now that I think about it, the very first time that we went to the Michigan Conservative Union's annual conference, and this was their annual conference, although I don't think it was always called the Save Our State Conference. But the first time was, yeah, that's right. That's right. And the very first Michigan CPAC that we attended was 10 years ago. And it was at that conference when they first announced they were going to pursue passing right to work in Michigan, which people said couldn't be done. And of course, now everybody claims the credit for passing right to work in Michigan. But we remember who was there that day. It was Trucker Randy Bishop. It was Norm Hughes, who we sadly lost just a little over a year ago, but it was his organization that hosted the conference. It was Senator Pat Colbeck, and it was State Representative Mike Shirkey back then. And there was Gary Glenn, and there was Vincent Vernuccio, and who else was there? I'm trying to remember who else there was. Tony DeMott from Campaign for Liberty was there. And this year we had a lot of great speakers, and Pat Colbeck was there again. Trucker Randy was there again. So the movement carries on. And what we were presenting there was hot off the presses, our very newest update to the plan to restore clean elections in Michigan. People are saying in the chat, Shane, that they don't hear your sound. And you know what? Let me see if I can fix that. It might be a problem on mine because I could hear you. Shane, I want you to say something briefly, and we'll see if we have sound for you here. Let's see. We might have an issue here, guys. All right, let me see what I can do about this, because I think what's happening is it's coming in my headset, and it's not passing through to the desktop. So hold on. There might be a way I can fix this. I apologize for this, guys. I am new at YouTube, so we are going to have to try to make the best of this. Let's see if I... Settings... Oh, boy. Let me see what I can do here. Boy, I'm making this worse, aren't I? Hold on, let me remove this from the screen so it's not too distracting here. Speakers. Let's see what this does. Here, try talking again, Shane. Let's see what happens now. Now I can't even hear you. Okay, that worked in the reverse. Let's try this one. Okay. Oh, I think I see something. It's working? I see some green lines. That's a good sign. All right. Looks like you're here. Sorry, folks, about the delay, but hey, you know what? I was going to take a few moments before we dive into it to give people an opportunity to arrive, because, I've seen people do live streams, and usually they like to at least wait a few moments for some people to come in. And I know a lot of people are interested in seeing what we have. Oh, they're saying the volume is low. Let me see what I can do about that. I have it up all the way. Maybe, Shane, if you have some way to turn up your microphone on your end, that might help. Because the volume is maxed out here. Wait, maybe it's not. Here, wait. Oh, it's maxed out on my computer too. I don't know. Hey, Shane, are you there?
Yeah, I don't know how to turn it up.
Okay. I guess just try speaking loudly, and we'll see what we can do about that. Anyway, so while we're waiting for some folks to come in, I wanted to share something I saw this week. I was speaking at a group in Saginaw, and they had these pamphlets on the table from a local organization in Sanilac County, of all places, which is way out in the thumb. And one of the things that we do at Rescue Michigan, we're really emphasizing the importance of building local organizations, building your own local organization, getting involved locally. And what caught my attention, this is the pamphlet here. It's from a group called We the County. And what I found so amazing about it was just how well produced it is for a local organization way out in the thumb. They made this. Here, I'll show you the other one they made. They have two of them. These pamphlets. This one, extremely well made. It's on glossy paper. It's in color. And if you open up the pamphlet, I mean, it's very well done. They've got these nice stock images. The text is also very good too. Like usually you see, you know, an ordinary grassroots communication will look, you know, something like this where the text is tiny and it's, you know, the text has colors on it, but you know, it's not so easy to read. But this group did a really great job, and their website, I will show you their website. Let me see if I can move it onto my screen here. It's wethecounty.org. Let's see if I can do this. Yeah, here we go. It's a pretty well-made website too. And I wonder if whoever designed these would be interested in helping some organizations design their own material. Someone says they're in 69 counties in Michigan. Well, this is the first I had heard of them. But bravo, guys. This is outstanding communications. If you look through their website, they've really done a great job. So I just want to showcase that, and also bring it back to something that a lot of people were asking me at the conference this weekend, which is so, you know, I'm involved in so many organizations. I don't know which one to choose. I don't know how to keep on top of so many different things. And people are asking, you know, how do you decide what you want to get involved with? And, you know, what do you do when there's so many groups? And why did you start the Rescue Michigan Coalition rather than, you know, working with any other group such as the Michigan Conservative Union? And the answer to that last question I had to give is simply that I just had to be my own boss, and I had to do things my way. And I've been involved in lots of other organizations before, and we all have differences. We all have different decisions on tactics. We all have different decisions on what our most important priorities are. And there's a lot of great groups out there, and you don't have to be involved in just one. And obviously, it's tough to be involved in every one of them. But, you know, you look at what at the work that they do, you look at, it's like with the news, and you see, or maybe you can't see, let me show you on my screen. We all have our favorite news sources. And on my web browser here, we've got some of my personal favorites. So we all used to use Breitbart, but then Breitbart turned into a pile of trash. Well, now there's Citizen Free Press, and it's a very Breitbart-like site that links a lot of articles, and so I like to go to them every day. And then we have, where'd American Greatness go? Well, of course, we've got Big League Politics, and Shane, you're the reporter for Big League Politics, so obviously I've got to check that site every day. Revolver.news is another great one, up and coming. Breitbart, not as good as they used to be, but still not bad. Another one I found that's just blown me away lately is AmericanGreatness.com. Has just absolutely outstanding commentary day after day after day. So how do you choose which news source you want to go to, and how do you don't have to choose just one. I mean, you choose a few. You know, I didn't mention Town Hall, not because I don't like it. You know, if I'm looking for more stuff, I might go there, but they're not in my top 5 anymore. And that kind of stuff happens. The Mackinac Center for Public Policy does great economic analysis, and they've been involved in, I'm getting an auto shutdown initiated message on my headset here. Shane, you might have to talk some more because it's making my headphones think that they're inactive.
Oh,
but
hey there, how's it going?
Oh, wait, that's right. You're not coming through my headphones anymore. We changed that. That's the problem. Well, shoot, you know what? I don't need these. All right. Now it feels like my head can breathe again. This is great. Anyway, you judge organizations by their work, and you get involved with organizations whose causes that you support, and there may be multiples. And conditions can change sometimes. The National Association of Gun Rights formed when certain employees at Gunners of America got fired because they attacked a politician that made a donor angry. I mean, these things happen from time to time. And it's up to you to decide what groups you want to support. And all you can do is stay engaged, stay involved, see what they do. I certainly always recommend staying involved locally. I mean, that's the most important thing, is your home group. But then for everything else, for state level fights, well, as I say, you see what groups are doing, you see how you want to get involved, and we're going to show you tonight what we are getting involved with. And let me make this other point, folks, because there's a big question of what's going to happen if, actually, I might go back to the chat before I really get into this document, but let me just finish my thought here. What's going to happen if multiple groups come out and they have competing election reform proposals and they're all different? We are not going to let that happen. And to the extent we possibly can. We can't stop any organization from filing whatever. But we are not going to be a fly-by-night operation. We are having high-level conversations with multiple organizations around the state, including the state party, including some of the larger conservative organizations. We're taking as much time as we can to get the policy right. And that's why when we first put this plan out less than a month ago, we called it a public draft. We want to get people's feedback on this stuff. And this is our second draft. And we're going to talk about the differences between the original form, what we have here, and what we're going to be adding into the next one, which is most likely going to be the final one. But let me go back briefly because I see there's people in the chat. So William Hamilton asks, how do I start in Lapeer County? And I don't know off the top of my head if there is still an organization in Lapeer County. I do know there's an organization meeting every single week in Oxford, which is adjacent to Lapeer County, and that's on our RescueMichigan.com calendar. So one of the things that we do, we really want to make it as easy as possible for organizations to network and get connected. Maybe later in the program tonight, we'll show you all how to do this. But when you log in, and I'm logged in, we have a tab that says Grassroots HQ, and we have a calendar tool on it. And you can actually post your own organization's meetings, and you can also see what we have on here. And there's the Oxford Township meetings. Next meeting is this Thursday, April 22nd, and there's the location right there. There's also one in Oakland Township, which is near Lapeer. And the other thing that we help you guys do is we offer voter files for any precinct anywhere in the entire state of Michigan. So if you're signed up, you're registered, and you've acquired the voter file, when you click voter lists, we have the ability where you can choose your precinct and you can choose certain selections within your precinct. So one of them is very likely Republicans with activists and donors. And if you click on that link, you can actually get a listing of all of the people in your own neighborhood who are the most likely to be Republicans and the most likely to be interested in getting engaged. And you go out and you knock on their door. Or you can even try to give them a phone call. We have phone numbers for them too. And this is what I think is going to be the most important thing for everything that we're working to do between now and 2022. We need to fix our election law. We need to get our state open again. And then next year, we're going to have races for House, for Senate, for Congress, for governor, for Attorney General, for Secretary of State. And what we really need right now is the grassroots organizing in every place in Michigan. And that means right in your own neighborhood. What we want to help people accomplish is building local organizations, smaller than just the county level, the city level, the township level, meeting regularly like that group in Oakland Township and Oxford do. They're meeting every single week for 1 hour. And that's the level of activity that we're really going to need because it's an all-out assault on our freedom right now. It's happening at every level. And the tools that we built at RescueMichigan.com are all about giving people the ability to organize locally. Shane, I've been going on for a long time. If there's anything you'd like to add, because I'm just about ready to dive in and start going through our election reform plan. But
yeah, there's a couple things that I would like to add. Namely that what's going on with all these different groups is that there is speak up.
Louder, yes, please.
Yeah, I mean I'm yelling. I'm whatever.
Okay.
Fuck this.
Go ahead. You're not inaudible. We were still hearing you, just not very well. But go ahead and say what you were saying.
No, you just go. I'm good.
All right. Well, I'm sorry, man. But again, feel free to chime in. I hear you fine. I think we just have an issue with YouTube. And again, folks, I apologize. This is only the second time we've ever done a live stream on YouTube. So maybe we can figure out some way for next time to make the audio better. But in the meantime, we do have a comment in the chat before I continue on. The Republicans in Midland, Michigan are all rhinos. They only work for big business and not the people. Well, to some extent. And I worked on a campaign in Midland, and I understand the corporate establishment in Midland is big. But here again, folks, it comes down to what kind of organization you can build. Because an organization that exists currently might be all rhinos, but you know what? Your neighbors aren't all rhinos. And they're everywhere. I live in the most liberal county in Michigan, Washtenaw County. We went 25% for Donald Trump, 75% for Biden, according to the official results. But you know what that means? That means there are 50,000 Trump voters in my county. They are out there. They are on your street. They are in your subdivision. They are waiting for you to knock on their door. And if the local political establishment is not to your liking, then you need to grow the organization to compete with that. So, he makes a point. Our public buildings in Gladwin and Midland are closed to the public, totally against the Public Meetings Act. Yes, totally unfair. We understand that. It's difficult to find a meeting place, but again, knocking on doors, talking to people, asking around, you will find something someplace. A church that's sympathetic that will let you meet there. Maybe it's just a pole barn in someone's yard. Some people have houses that they can welcome guests into, depending on the home, depending on the neighborhood, depending on the community. Reach out, do the best you can, and sooner or later, things will start to fall into play. But the most important thing is going out there and trying. Robert says, how about Shane call Adam's cell, put on speakerphone? Hey, yeah, that might work. Let me see. Well, I'll give it our best shot here. Let's see. And I wonder, maybe I could even make it, connect over.
Okay, you hear me better now?
Hold on, say it again.
I'm just wondering, can you hear me better now? I hooked up a different microphone.
It's still pretty low here. Why don't you try, we'll give it a shot. I'll put you on speaker on my regular phone. Leave your camera on so we can see it too, but we'll see how this goes. This might be awkward. And again, thanks for bearing with us, folks. We appreciate it. Hey, Shane, are you there?
Can you hear me?
We do. Although now it's feeding back into my speakers. Hold on. Try it one more time. Let's see what happens here.
Hello?
Hold on. Let me go back to... Hold on. Oh, you probably can't hear me very well now, can you?
I can hear you.
Okay. Is there feedback, guys? Does this sound okay? Shane, can you say something?
Yes.
Okay. It looks like it is coming in the mic. I'm going to turn the sound off on the Hangout, and that should solve the problem. We'll see. All right, you can go ahead and speak, and let's see if this works.
Okay. So what I wanted to do was talk about what Tammy Carlone is doing.
Oh, great. Yes, please.
Yeah, she's has like this voter fraud coordination network that she's doing, and I think people need to get plugged into that, because she just is making sure that everyone's on the same page and that we're not stepping on each other's toes. There's a lot of different groups, a lot of different well-meaning groups that are working in different counties. There's like different committees. There's rival committees. People have different ideas on how to achieve reform. And we've seen it so many times where, like-minded people, well-meaning people, well-intentioned people, will end up at each other's throats. And then what happens? We lose, the Democrats win, we don't get the reforms passed. So, I know that, me in the 11th district, we're working with another committee in Oakland County, letting them kind of, flesh out the reform ideas and kind of liaisoning with them and trying to get them get our liaisons to talk to the Oakland County Elections Reform Committee and let them know about rescue and all the stuff that we're doing here. So a lot of what we're doing here with rescue in particular is trying to bring people together. We don't want it to become a factional kind of thing. We want Rescue Michigan to be something that other groups can use as a resource to make them more effective, and we can all grow together and we can all grow independently, and we're not reliant on the political establishment and their tools, and they get all the data. Those days that need to come to an end, and that's what we're going to bring about in Michigan. That's about all I got, Adam.
Yeah, that's an important point. We're threading a needle here between what plan is going to be strong enough that that'll be, first of all, worth supporting to begin with, and secondly, that's going to be something that the grassroots will rally behind, that they're going to want to get the signatures, and it's also got to be something the legislature will sign. And I think we've got some leverage in the fact that if 500,000 people sign a petition, it's a pretty strong mandate to the legislature to go ahead and pass it. But these things are all being discussed on an ongoing basis. We're going to show you what we have so far, and we're going to talk a little bit later on about what the next stages are, where this is going, and where we're hoping to end up and when we're hoping to go out and start knocking on doors and collecting the actual signatures to get this thing done. But first, let's go through what we have here. If you saw how I got to this page, it's linked from the homepage at rescuemichigan.com, so you can follow along if you like, or you can read it at your leisure. And we're just going to break it down here. So this is a long document. It's a 119-page bill when printed off. And a lot of that is actually the pre-existing law, because when you write legislation, we wrote the legislation exactly the way the legislature themselves would write it, so that if we get the language approved and the signatures are collected, we can give them exactly what they would have with no discrepancies whatsoever. And again, this is not the final version, and we're going to talk about why certain things might not be in the final and certain other things might be added in. But we're going to go through what we have here. First, we have this top-level summary of what the major elements of the plan are. And I saw somebody saying the problem's not the law, the problem is the law wasn't enforced. Well, there are mechanisms in the law for enforcement, and there are ways that those things can be tightened up, and we're going to go through some of those elements here. So this is the top-level analysis of what the bill does, although as we go through it, there may even be one or two things I forgot to put in the summary. But what we did was we made it so that they're easy to find now in the bill, because like I said, the bill is very long, but each of these elements has a link that as you move the mouse cursor over it, it'll jump down to where in the document it says what each of these things are. And it also has within the text of the bill, I just jumped down to one of them here. The text of the bill is in this, it's called monospaced font, where all the letters take up the same amount of space. And then occasionally they'll have these little boxes that break out kind of a plain English summary of what they're doing. And then each of the boxes also has a link to go back to the top. So if you want to go through the proposal, that's probably the easiest way to do it, but you can also read through it line by line. And we're going to move kind of quickly on this because I don't want to be here all night. It is a lengthy bill. What we've essentially done is combine some of the elements that we had in our original proposal with the elements from the Senate bills, the 39 Senate bill proposal that we liked. And there were some things in there that we most certainly did not like. We've been talking about that in some of our more recent email blasts. But there are other things that were fine too. And we're going to see them right now. So first we have the title of the bill, and that is this entire screen here, listing off all the different elements of the election law that it would amend. And this is very important because when we do what's called a citizen-initiated law, which is the only way to pass legislation that's not subject to the governor's veto, you can only amend one law in one bill. So if we were to amend multiple laws, we'd have to do it multiple times in multiple bills, and it's just not possible in the way the Michigan Constitution is written. So fortunately, almost everything we'd want to do, we can do in one bill because it all affects what's in Michigan's election law. But there are some elements that we can't incorporate. That, for example, Senate Bill 289 was one bill that we liked, and what it did was it said Michigan cannot accept federal funding for elections except with the approval of the legislature. So if Washington wants to dump a whole bunch of cash to go to left-wing organizations and left-wing counties in Michigan, they would have to get the approval of the legislature. Good bill, not the most important thing under the sun. However, the problem is that bill would not amend the election law. It would amend a different law. So we couldn't put it in with everything else that we've got here. Another example, someone suggested it'd be great if we had election specialty courts. Well, those would amend the Judicature Act, not the election law. So we couldn't include that in this. But that being said, within the election law, there are a lot of things that we can do, and that we're going to do as we read through it here. So, in the box here, we just say what I just said. This is a summary of the bill, and now you're going to see the language of the bill and everything that's in bold-faced text. This is what our proposal would add. Everything that's struck out, our proposal would eliminate, and everything that's in plain text is what is currently the law. Now, the way the bill is organized is in the numerical order of the sections that it's changing. So we're not going to get a bill where the most important and interesting things are at the top, which is what you'd like. It's just going to be in the numerical order where the way the law that was written. So the first thing here, this addition came from one of the Senate bills, and it's not the most important thing, folks. And I understand that. We're going to get to the big stuff later, but we thought it was important to include the elements of what the legislature had come up with because it's important that we show them that there's some buy-in here, that we do like the idea. And what this is doing in section 24A is just saying that large counties should have larger boards of canvassers. And the intention obviously is to address what happened in Wayne County, which is the largest county in Michigan, and where the 2 Republican members of that board were intensely pressured to certify an election that they knew had all kinds of terrible problems. So this proposes that a mid-sized county, which I think this would cover Washtenaw County, Ingham County, Kent County, those level counties, they'd have 6-member board of canvassers, and then with counties with a population of 750,000 or more, and that would be Wayne County, Oakland County, maybe Macomb County. I think Macomb County. They'd have an 8-member board. And the idea is that if you have more than just 2 Republicans on the board, they might have some strength in numbers. Again, not the most important thing, but the only reason it's up at the top of the bill and listed first is because that's just the section where in the election law they had the board of canvassers. And by the way, because we are at 119 pages of this bill, and we're going to probably be looking to expand it even more with some other ideas that we have, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But some things may end up being taken out of the bill, and some things like this that are probably not all that controversial, we may actually just try to pass through the legislature through the normal manner, because this is the kind of thing that the governor might not actually even veto this. It's not an unreasonable proposal. It doesn't really come with much of a partisan angle to it. And the problem is, if a bill is really complex, they're going to make the argument, the other side will make the argument that people didn't know what they were signing when they signed their petitions. And that argument may or may not have merit, but that's going to be up to a court to decide. And we may want to limit the proposal to as few things as we think are absolutely essential, to the point where the question of, is this worth the risk of making this thing more complicated, more likely to be attacked because they'll say people didn't know what they were signing when you signed your initiative petition. So this is one example of something that we have in our plan because we want to lay out everything that could be done to fix the elections. But this particular element might come out just because it's not the most important thing. It might be something the legislature could do on their own. And it might actually, by having it in here, ultimately end up being more of a risk than a benefit. So nevertheless, we did want to lay it all out. We want to include everything to reform Michigan's election law that we like. And that's where this draft is now. Where it's going into the next stage is where we really sit down with high-level election attorneys and figure out exactly if there's anything we missed, and if there's anything that's critical to put in. But we're going to go through this, and I think you'll see there's a lot to like in this document. Real quick, Keith asks, where might I find this document? Sorry if I missed it before. Keith, you go to rescuemichigan.com, and right from the homepage, there will be a link. So I'll just go back to the homepage, and I'll show you here. rescuemichigan.com, and I'm logged in, so it's just showing that. But then right here, it says breaking news, April 15th, read the updated election reform plan here. You click the link, and then that'll take you right to this page. So, all right, getting back into it, there's a number of, again, reprinting existing law. We can skip right over this because this is all the current law. There's nothing to see here. Renumbering some paragraphs, and then everything else here is just adding additional language to update what's there because of the addition of 6-member and 8-member boards of canvassers. So there's nothing new interesting here. This is just more of the same element that we just looked at. So this goes on and on. But here we got another one. Not later than 15 days before each August primary election held in an even-numbered year, each board of county canvassers shall examine the absent voter secrecy envelope containers. This was a bill that was passed last year, and that's why it says before October 15th, 2020 here. And it relates to the security of absentee voter ballot containers. And this is where the absentee ballots go when they're put in drop boxes, which later on we're going to see we're going to want to eliminate that. But they also should be in place at the clerk's offices. This is a security problem with absentee ballots. When I went to my own clerk's office to vote, I know my township clerk personally, so she let me back into the office, and she showed me, here's a big pile, and she showed me there's trays of just the absentee ballot envelopes just sitting there. And yeah, there could be a problem with that. If anybody who has access to a township clerk, to a township building potentially, is able to steam open envelopes, replace things that are in envelopes, it's important that you secure your absentee ballot containers. So all this is doing here is saying that this provision that was going to expire on October 15th needs to be permanent. So it's a simple provision, but there that is right there. All right, moving on here. Oh, this is just this section here is just for clarification. There are elements here that are going to confuse people. Why are we crossing out shall and writing in must? Why are we crossing out them and writing in the clerks? The reason why we're doing that is because the Legislative Services Bureau, the attorneys that draft legislation, they do that, and they will do that. And again, we want our bill to mirror theirs. So we've consulted with attorneys who prepare legislation, And they say this is exactly what they're going to do, so we're going to do it this way, just the same, so that our bill mirrors exactly what theirs would accomplish. So these don't actually change anything. They do this because they have certain style guidelines. So you'll see, for example, they'll cross off person and write in individual. Maybe that's because of Citizens United. I don't know. You'll see that where it says man will be replaced with man or woman. Things like that. These don't actually have impact, but you'll see them. If you're wondering what they're doing, they're probably not doing anything. So just so you're aware, when you see some things like this, they usually don't do anything. And there's going to be a lot of these. All right, getting back to the substance of the proposal. What we're doing here is establishing certain requirements for the training of election workers. This is something I know a lot about personally. I was a poll worker for the city of Detroit. In fact, if you remember the infamous Detroit leaks that Shane Trejo promoted extensively at bigleaguepolitics.com, that was a recording that I captured when I was being trained as a poll worker. And in fact, they trained us to abuse the social distancing rules to impede poll challengers. And in fact, not only did I take this story to the media, I also crowdfunded a lawsuit that we won with the out-of-court settlement on the Wednesday before the election. Unfortunately, the Secretary of State did not honor the terms of the agreement with the court, and there should be litigation around this, because they never did actually tell any election workers not to impede poll challengers, that they'd actually lost in an out-of-court settlement. So what we're proposing to put in here is that every poll worker and election inspector, election official training has to include the fact that impeding poll challenger rights is a felony in Michigan. That might make them a little less liable to do it. And the other thing is we're going to be creating a badge requirement so that if a poll worker does infringe upon your rights, you have the ability to know who they are, to identify them in the criminal complaint you'll be filing against them. So it says the curriculum must include, but not be limited to, information on the rights of election challengers to conduct their activities, and that any violation of those rights is a felony. And we'll be expanding some of this we'll be expanding on this a little bit later in this very same bill. So with that, we can move on to the next. And some of these things I was talking about are also restated here, so those are on the webpage. Here, the same thing, but this is for the election officials, but the same requirement. And now we've got another provision here, and this is a big one, folks. Probably one of the biggest. Signature verification. Probably the number one biggest way to steal an election is through absentee ballots. That was the conclusion of the Carter-Baker Commission report. Absentee ballots are a source for fraud. So what the Secretary of State did, illegally, according to the Court of Claims, after the election, the Court of Claims got around to saying, hey, no, you shouldn't have done that. Didn't actually cause any remedies or anything, but what the Secretary of State did was have a presumption that, and she told every single clerk, you have a presumption that the signature is valid. And the Court of Claims said, no, you did not go through the rulemaking process, which the rulemaking process involves public hearings, it involves legislative review. It typically takes years, although it doesn't have to. The Secretary of State did none of that. So we have to have a universal signature verification standard, and later on in this bill that will be established. Here we're requiring signature verification training for all county, city, and township clerks and for all precinct inspectors to comply with the rules promulgated by the Secretary of State under subsection 3. So that's coming up in a moment, for an objective signature verification process. And that's right down here. Pursuant to the Administrative Procedures Act, the Secretary of State shall promulgate rules establishing an objective signature verification process that is to be used in training for all county, city, and township clerks. The objective signature verification process must not include a presumption regarding the validity of any signature that is to be verified. So there will be a signature standard, and I don't see it in this particular spot, but we'll see elsewhere in this proposal. It has to apply equally to elections as well as to initiative petitions. Because if you've noticed, the Secretary of State has taken her sweet time very rigorously examining those signatures on the Unlock Michigan petitions, but not so much with the votes. Yeah. Same thing in California. They're very rigorously reviewing those signatures for the recall of Gavin Newsom, not so much for the actual voters. So a signature standard is important, and having it be done through the rulemaking process means it will be accessible to the public notices, public hearings, and then ultimately publication in the Michigan Administrative Code. So that is what that does. All right, now this section, this came from the legislature, and this relates to the audits, and particularly to transparency in audits, because, you know, people don't really know what exactly an election audit is, and whether that's something where a forensics team is brought in to examine whether or not the ballots were creased and therefore might or might not be possible to have been in envelopes or not, versus just, you know, looking at the results and seeing if the numbers match or not. This provides transparency for the audits. So here we say not less than 5 days before the date of an election audit. They must be open to poll challengers. Election inspectors must be appointed from both political parties. In any precinct selected for an audit, the party may designate observers to monitor the proceedings. In addition, the Secretary of State shall provide live video streaming of the election audit in each precinct on the Secretary of State's website. So for the first time, the public will be able to see exactly what happens at an audit from start to finish. So, and it also allows individuals to bring their own cameras and record what happens. So there'll be documentation of evidence. So if the laws are broken, there will be ample evidence of how laws were broken for a court to adjudicate. Not relying on just affidavits, but have actual video evidence that a court can consider and that the public can see. All right, next we have Section 31B, not later than July 1st of each odd-numbered year or March and July of each even-numbered year. The Secretary of State shall provide a report to the legislature detailing each contract the Secretary of State has entered into with an entity for an election-related activity or service. So there's transparency there, and we'll see later on in this proposal, we also have a prohibition on private money for elections. We'll talk about that when we get there. Moving on down here, let's see what we have next. Requirement about the canvassers of petitions. So when the Secretary of State takes 6 months or more to complete the canvass for the Unlock Michigan petitions, which is ridiculous, we're saying no, the petitions have to be completed within 100 days and then immediately forwarded to the legislature for consideration. So we've got that there. Now moving on. This is relating to requiring the Secretary of State keep their records up to date. And this comes from the legislature's proposal. So it requires the Secretary make a report to the legislature regarding all different programs that she uses to keep track with address verification. So that's all in here. And they have all these other requirements. So this is reporting, making sure that the voter rolls are kept current. They have to make all these reports. They have to check these different services. They have to report which services they're using. Electors who have changed residence and moved out of state, changed residence, moved in-state. In-state duplicate voter registration cards, electors determined to be deceased. Then they make these reports public. The date the Secretary notified electors affected by the information obtained, saying, hey, you're not registered there anymore. And folks, when you go to rescuemichigan.com and you download your precinct voter file, you may find voters that don't live anymore where they're registered. And that's a tool that you can use to say, hey, wait, if someone doesn't live there, you know, if you find that out, you can notify somebody. So these are tools that you can use locally to help clean the voter rolls. So take advantage of that. So that's all this does. And again, solid stuff. Important that we have clean voter rolls. And here's a big one. Only the Secretary of State, a designated voter registration agency, and that means a public agency, not a private company, or a county, city, or township clerk shall have access to the qualified voter file. So we won't have Rock the Vote going in and looking directly at the qualified voter file in a way that the average person cannot. So there is a prohibition on that. Only the government has access to the qualified voter file. Doesn't apply to Freedom of Information Act requests, but there's a lot in the voter file that's not Freedom of Information Act, including signatures, for example. So anyway, that's all of that. Oh, we left out the Senate bill to allow 16-year-olds to pre-register to vote. Dang. Oh, well. Let's have to leave that one aside. Hey, Shane, what do you make of all this? I've been talking for a long time. I need a sip of water, but I've gone through like 4 or 5 things already. We've got a lot further to go. So what do you make of all this?
Well, you know, I don't trust anything from the legislature pretty much. So I'm kind of discouraged on the prospects of anything good ever coming out of the legislature. So yeah, that's kind of my thing. Whatever provisions are good in these bills will probably be gutted through the process by our esteemed Republican lawmakers, and it'll end up bad. That's why I kind of got all my I'm support. I think our only chance is with the legislative initiative, unfortunately.
The citizen-initiated law. Yeah, well, I mean, that's what we're pursuing right now. And to be fair, some of the things the legislature came up with, we didn't think of. There was the Senate bill to require that every single voter be given the full text of a proposal. That's pretty cool, because those proposals are almost always tax increases. And when voters sees, hey, here's this 30-page bill that you have to get a copy of to before you vote on it, that's going to lead people to vote no. So there were some things in there that were kind of cool. But yeah, I think we've got more. And there were some things that we both had. So some of those things maybe the legislature can do on their own. But anyway, let's see what else we got here. Okay, now this is, I said earlier that you'll often see shall crossed out and must written in. Well, this is may to shall, and those are not the same thing. This is making something mandatory that before was optional. The city, county, or township clerk shall capture or I don't know why they didn't use must, but for some reason they used shall. Anyway, they have the same legal meaning. There's just a style difference. But anyhow, capture or reproduce the signature of an elector from a voter registration application and transmit that to the qualified voter file. And that's important because what we have in this proposal further down is that there must be signature verification. When I worked as a polling place in Detroit, there was no signature verification whatsoever. None. And we're going to change that. So we have to make sure the Secretary of State has every voter's signature from when they apply to vote. So that is that piece right here. Here we have, this came from the legislative proposal, I think, one of their bills, increasing the frequency that clerks must forward last known addresses to the Secretary of State when they get flagged for being dead, and some other elements in here. So each county clerk has to, at least every 2 weeks or more often if necessary, use a list and the information provided by the Secretary of State to flag in the qualified voter file the registration record of any deceased elector in the county. Elector just means voter, and so on. So this is more cleaning up the rolls language. And again, this came from the legislature. At least once a month, the secretary will collect all this information, post on the Department of State website all of the following: the total number of registrations flagged, total number of registrations flagged broken down by clerks, and flagged broken down by city and township. So it's requiring they clean the rolls on a regular basis, and it's also requiring more transparency. Now, what we're doing here, let's see. Each election before giving. Okay, now this is a big one, and this one came from the to be fair, this one came from the legislature, doing away with the affidavits. If you don't have ID to vote in Michigan currently, you are required to sign an affidavit saying, "Yeah, I'm who I say I am. Trust me, I wouldn't lie." And then they give you a regular ballot, and the ballot goes into the tabulator and can never be taken back. That's it. That's the way that the ballot occurs. Once that ballot is in the machine, it is indistinct from any other ballot. That vote is counted, if it's being counted. But it is no longer identified with you. It is anonymous. Once you have a regular ballot in the machine, it's the same as any other one. It can never be traced back to an individual voter. Well, if you don't have ID, here's an idea. Instead of having them sign an affidavit, just make their ballot provisional. So what will happen if a voter does not have identification for election purposes as required? That voter is issued a provisional ballot. A provisional ballot is not processed on election day. They are placed in an envelope, and they are only counted if you follow up with your clerk and you verify that you are who you say you are. It is a process. It can be done, but it often is not done. And by the way, folks, in Detroit, where I was a poll worker, the number of people who did not have ID was 0. Everybody has ID. That is a U.S. citizen in Michigan, just about. Like I said, in my precinct, the whole notion that it is racist to require ID. No, nobody at my precinct in Detroit did not have ID. Every single one of them had ID. Anyway, so there's no signature verification for this anymore because there's no affidavit anymore. You don't have ID, you get a provisional ballot. Done. The end. So that's what all that is. And now moving on. Okay, so this is more what we call complying language with what we just talked about. So now notice provider will say their provisional ballot will only be tabulated if within 6 days of the election the voter verifies his or her voter registration record with the proper city or township clerk, or the voter establishes who to identify his or her identity and residence with the proper city or township clerk using identification for election purposes, along with the current utility bill, bank statement, paycheck, government check, or other government document to establish the voter's current registered address. So we're being rigorous here. If you don't have ID, you get a provisional ballot, and then you can still verify later. But it's on the voter to verify. The burden is not on the poll worker. It's on nobody, really. If you sign an affidavit, okay, yeah, I'm so-and-so. Sure, give me a ballot. And if you are committing fraud, there is no remedy for that. There's no mechanism to stop that. Well, now there is. All right. Moving on. Let's see what we got here. This is the badge requirement. Between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. on election day and at least all other times while in his or her official capacity as election inspector, an individual appointing and acting as an election inspector must wear a badge that includes his or her first and last name printed legibly on the badge. And it is a misdemeanor not to. So you are identifiable as a poll worker. And if you're not, you're committing a crime. So if you're committing a unlawful impeding of poll workers, which is a felony in Michigan, as you will have been trained to understand, the person can identify you in the police report. All right. Next. This is a big one. And this is one that we thought of and the legislature hadn't thought of, but this might be one of the most important things. And that is providing a mechanism for the bipartisan election of poll workers. Because one of the major safeguards in an election is the fact that the election process is, it's understood to be an adversarial process. People are competing for power, Democrats versus Republicans. You have to have both parties represented as poll workers. At the end of the day, a poll challenger is just a witness. But the people that are the ones that actually make the decision whether or not to count a ballot one way or the other are the poll workers themselves. And the most important thing that we can do is make sure that we actually have genuine bipartisan representation of poll workers. And what Detroit did to go around that, well, there were several things that they did. One thing they did was they didn't even put the application to become a poll worker on their website. So only people who were in the know knew where to go and apply. And then when they saw people who they knew were the Republican activists applying to be poll workers, as is their right, by the way, there's nothing wrong with being of a particular persuasion to be a poll worker. It's an adversarial process, and people who are working at elections tend to care about elections. That's totally fine. But they knew who the Republicans were, and they systematically refused to hire them. So that when I got to my poll worker training, they made a point to note, we've hired a lot of teenagers who are going to be working the computers right now. In fact, we're going to have a problem because teenagers aren't allowed to work after 1 a.m., and they're supposed to be there all night, or they're going to be waiting there all night at the receiving board to hand in their laptop. So someone's going to do that job for them. So making sure that they have a genuine bipartisan poll worker selection process is really, really crucial. And here's what we do. We require the Board of Election Commissioners to give the following individuals first priority, and then another set second priority. First, those who are on a list submitted by a major political party who have filed a properly completed application to be an election inspector and are qualified to serve. So the county parties can say, here's who we want to be poll workers. And they will know, because the people who care about election fraud are going to be getting involved with their parties. Say, hey, I want to be a poll worker. They'll put you on the list, and they will have to hire you first. And then secondly, they have to hire actual qualified registered voters before they hire aliens, felons, and minors. Actually, in Michigan, as long as you're not in jail, felons can vote, but that's a whole other story. And finally, it also says that of the pool of eligible individuals within each category, they have to be appointed by random selection. So they can't just choose to hire their friends. And it's also, by the way, in current law. It's in current law that they hire an equal number of Democrats and Republicans. It's just that they were able to avoid it because in Michigan, we don't have partisan voter registration. So other than the 1% of us who might be precinct delegates or elected officials, you put down whichever party you want to be counted for. And that's all it takes. And of course, that's what people did. So this way, if the Republican Party says, here's who we want you to hire, and these are our people, those people get hired first. And we'll see there's other safeguards that this works with. And that might be coming right up, or it might be further down in the document. So let's see where we get to next. Okay, here's one that came from the legislature, and this is another. This goes to the same thing, but it's also this is all building on what we had here. So here it says, if a city or township board of election commissioners is not able to appoint an equal number, the clerk must submit a report to the Secretary of State not later than 10 days later, detailing what efforts were made to appoint people of equal number. So just a transparency measure. But then here we have that they have a clear and specific time window when they're hiring and a clear and specific process to apply to be a poll worker online. So at least 40 days, but not more than 90 days before each election. So there's the hiring period. Each city and township clerk must post notice on the website, including the application process. The posted notice must include information for completing and submitting the application to be a precinct election inspector electronically to the city or township clerk. They shall not accept an application more than 90 days before the election and may only accept an application less than 40 days if there are not sufficient individuals already hired or already submitted. And only those individuals who submit a properly completed application to be an election inspector are qualified. So we've clearly defined what the process is to be hired as a poll worker. We require that they give equal representation to Democrats and Republicans. They have to submit a report if they don't. The parties get first pick in who they hire. And then finally, within the group of people that apply, they choose by random selection. So all of this is absolutely critical because what they did last November was they controlled the environment at TCF. They controlled who was a poll worker. They controlled who had authority, and they hired young kids who would be obedient to those authorities. So here's how we get around that. All right. Each city or township clerk must make the application available electronically, so it's open to the public how they apply. And that is how we regulate a fair process for appointing poll workers. Here's a kind of big one. Require security features on ballots. There were stories of ballots that didn't have postmarks that were received by clerks. We deal with that in here somewhere too. And ballots are easy to duplicate. There's a New York Post story where a guy who was a convicted criminal in election fraud said, yeah, we had people that worked at USPS. We would intercept envelopes, we'd steam them open, we'd replace them with our own. And it'd be easy because the ballots were just on plain paper and black ink. So we propose security features to prevent duplication, including but not limited to use of color inks and micro printing. You know, your currency has money for a reason. How much money is a vote worth? Millions, billions, trillions of dollars are affected by the results of an election. I'd say that's important. Will there be a cost associated? Yes. A worthwhile cost. For all the things the government spends money on, this ought to be one of those things. All right, so that was a big one right there. Let's see here. What do we got next? Okay, this is expanding the number of poll challengers for large absent voter counting boards. Uh-oh, looks like we lost Shane here. Let me just switch back to, can I switch to just me? See if I can do that. What is this going to do? That kind of sort of works.
I'm still on the phone, though.
Okay, cool. We can still hear you? All right, let me move my window out here. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, great. All right. If an absent voter counting board is established, if they're counting more than 3,000 ballots, they need to have more challengers. And I think here's where this is one element that I think we still have some work to do, because what we really need to have happen is to have these gigantic counting boards broken up. There's no reason every single ballot in Detroit, 500 plus precincts, ought to be counted in one single location. But this is at least a partial remedy to expand the number of challengers allowed based on how many voters' ballots they're counting. So for every additional 3,000 ballots, the party gets to have an additional 2 challengers. All right. Coming up next, a political party, incorporated organization, or committee of interested citizens or individuals shall not provide compensation to an individual to be an election challenger. There are concerns that what they did in Detroit was they just paid people to go in and make a ruckus. And poll challenger it's an important legal duty. It's a safeguard on the election. They shouldn't just be hired guns. They should be people that are trained and interested in preserving the integrity of the election, serious, genuine, motivated people. They should not need to be paid. They should be organizers, volunteers, not just people they bring in off the street to be hired heavies. All right, now this stuff came from the legislature, from one of the Senate bills, and it's codifying the rights of poll challengers. I was a little unsure about this one because these already are their rights. They have this. This is what we won in court 5 days before Election Day, was for the Secretary of State to agree that they have to give them reasonable distance. And that means a distance that allows election inspectors sufficient room to perform their duties while still allowing challengers to clearly read and observe the poll books. And again, when I was being trained as a poll worker, I remember clearly how they were telling us how exactly you could abuse the social distancing rules to impede poll challengers. They said they have to wear masks and they have to stay 6 feet back. And that's important because they can come behind your table, but if they don't have 6 feet, they can't come back there. And that was exactly what they were telling them. In fact, then a member of the audience said, well, if they're 6 feet back, they can't actually see. And she interrupts her and goes, exactly. That was what their intention was to abuse social distancing rules to impede poll challengers. So here we are laying out the rights of poll challengers, which are rights they already have, but, putting them in statute might actually expand that and protect a little bit. So very good here. And again, this is already their right, but I've had people in polling places push back on this, and I've stood my ground saying, no, I'm certain I have the right to see the tape that comes out of that machine when the polls close. But some of them will push back, so okay, put it in statute, very good. But here's one thing they don't already have a right to do. And that's to use a smartphone, tablet, laptop, or other electronic device in a polling place or at a counting board, as long as it's not hindering or impeding an elector's right to vote a secret ballot. And again, this actually came from the legislature, and I thought this is one the media is going to attack because they're going to say, oh, you're intimidating voters. Oh, you're intimidating voters. And first of all, it says right there, does not hinder or impede a voter's right to vote on a secret ballot. As long as the ballot is private, there's no intimidation happening. And as a matter of fact, at a polling place where I worked, no voter cared at all about the secrecy of their ballot. All day long, they handed me they exposed their ballots, which I didn't even know at the time. If someone exposes the ballot to you, the proper thing to do is say, sorry, you exposed your ballot to me. Have a nice day. Get lost. You can't vote anymore. But the process was so botched up. The secrecy sleeves didn't even cover the ballots. So even the people that did keep them in the secrecy sleeves, I could see what was on their ballot. Nobody cared. At one point, a documentarian for NBC News came in. Nobody cared. He walked around the room for 15, 20 minutes with his video camera. Nobody cared. It is not intimidating voters. They don't care. It's a talking point from the left just because they're opposed to what we're doing. So anyway, so there's that. Also, a right for the challenger expelled from a polling place to demand and be provided a written explanation for the expulsion from the chairperson of the Board of Election Inspectors so they can document the crime that was perpetrated against them. So big stuff here, folks. I mean, this is where our case had problems because we had affidavits, but we did not have proof. Videos are proof. Videos are better than witnesses. So these are major transparency measures. All right, coming up next. This is more about impeding poll challengers. If a chairperson of a board of election inspectors or a challenger or anybody else infringes on the rights of a challenger, the alleged infringement must be noted in the log for the precinct and reported to the clerk of the city or township where that precinct is located. Again, documenting evidence. And it's funny because it says here if someone is determined to have infringed on the rights of a poll challenger, the city or township clerk shall prohibit that individual from overseeing or monitoring election activities for 2 years. Well, yeah, because they'll be in jail anyway. I mean, not necessarily. We do have a 2-year felony in here it actually currently is a 2-year felony for infringing on the rights of poll challengers, but obviously the legal process, you don't usually get the maximum sentence. Usually you don't even get the minimum sentence. You get some kind of plea deal. But anyway, here it says you can't work at an election if you're found to have illegally infringed upon poll challengers. Rich alias dude says affidavits are proof. No, they're not. An affidavit is a sworn statement and a court will consider it. This is what someone has said under penalty of perjury they believe happens. And I submitted my affidavit, and mine was rigorously documented. But that is not, that an affidavit in and of itself are not proof. I'm sorry, folks, talk to an attorney. An affidavit is a statement. It is evidence. Evidence is not automatically proof. Hey, Shane, what's up?
Hey, I'm back.
Hey, how's it going, buddy?
It's going good. And yeah, to talk about the affidavits thing is that, there's obviously enough affidavits that were signed, and there was, if you look at what all the affidavits were saying in all the different states, they, definitely painted a picture of that there was, a fraud blueprint that was enacted involving the mail-in ballots and the mysterious stopping of the vote all at once. And
I agree. I'm not saying there wasn't enough evidence in the affidavits. I'm just saying an affidavit in and of itself does not automatically constitute proof.
I agree, and it's just that obviously but I just want to kind of talk to that point, kind of clarify the point that the affidavits aren't proof in and of themselves, but when you have that many affidavits and you have that hundreds of people who've had the same sort of thing happen to them, and they're all describing this and obviously did happen that way, that's when the courts should take effect. And then the courts did not. And that's where the whole cover-up aspect comes into it, the way the affidavits were swept under the rug, the way the courts would not consider them in, I don't think any case. Maybe there was a handful that there was actually active cases, but most of them just got completely dismissed. There was never an investigation. So, an affidavit alone is not enough to, overturn a stolen election hypothetically. But, that's kind of a starting point for where actual legitimate investigations and inquiries can begin. And obviously that's what's been covered up, and that's what we're fighting against.
Right. But my point is, Chris Thomas, the director of elections, submitted an affidavit of his own saying, no, what these people are saying isn't true. Well, they can't both be right. The video evidence, that is what establishes for the record exactly what happened beyond disputation. That's why video evidence is so important. So, all right, let's move on, folks. We just looked at the statement about requiring poll challengers, if they're expelled for any reason, they be documented. This was in our previous draft, and this is just to clarify that infringing on the rights of poll challengers is a felony. Again, existing law, it already says punishable by imprisonment in state prison not exceeding 2 years. That generally is the definition of a felony. But we did hear there was at least one lawyer who said she was not sure because it does not actually say felony. There may be some exceptions. So we clarify guilty of a felony just to make it clear there. And now we have the rights of poll watchers. A poll watcher may observe a poll book and election materials. And a poll watcher also may document what's going on as long as it doesn't infringe on a voter's right to vote on a secret ballot. And again, to remain during the canvass of votes until a statement of returns is duly signed and made. And that's what they currently have a right to do, but just to make clear, and to obtain the results from the receipt tape that comes out at the end of the election. So there's the rights of poll watchers. Here's an important one. Each poll book must include the name and political party affiliation of each election inspector appointed to that election precinct. And by the way, folks, look, our bailiwick is getting the election law fixed, but other people, other groups are working on the litigation side and the freedom of information side. I would strongly encourage you to FOIA the poll books in the city of Detroit and discover, and the applications to become poll workers, and see how well they actually balance the party affiliation of the poll workers. Because I got a feeling those children didn't all put down their Republicans. I think they just didn't hire Republicans. I think they broke the law when they did not when they did not hire as even as possible a number of Democrats and Republicans. But this requires that be documented in the poll book. Now here we have a proposal. I mentioned this earlier. If a ballot proposal appears on a ballot provided to an elector, the full text of ballot proposal must be provided to that elector. I personally love this. It might not end up in the final version of the bill only because it's not actually addressing vote fraud. In the same way of the vote fraud that we're talking about, but oftentimes there'll be a proposal on the ballot that almost always are tax increases, and they are usually just say, would you propose this millage increase for schools or for roads or for whatever it is? And people almost always they pass because it's a well-used political machine. And this would require that the full text of every ballot proposal be provided to that elector. And that would also include things like the marijuana bill, the Voters Not Politicians proposal, and all of these things work against the passage of proposals. Because when people see the full text of a proposal, they're more likely to vote no when they see something they don't understand. So I personally love this proposal. However, it's not exactly vote fraud. It is informing voters. But as I had said earlier, if we have an issue where the complexity of what we're trying to do might become a problem for getting the signatures approved by the Board of State Canvassers or being challenged in court and people saying people don't know what they signed, if we have to simplify, this might be one of those things that we take out, even though we don't want to. So just be aware of that, and let's go on to the next thing here. Let's see here. You guys will love this one. This is a big deal. This prevents third-party absentee voter requests. It removes this possibility, a written request signed by the voter. That's what those third-party applications for absentee ballots are. Just a letter signed by a voter. That's all they have to be. The other two things are the federal postcard application. We can't do away with that. It's required by federal law. But it's a federal postcard. It's not a third-party private organization's request for an absentee ballot. And then there's this one, an absentee voter ballot application provided for that purpose by the clerk of the city or township. That includes the city or township logo embossed on the application. So they won't be able to be forged. If they get an application for an absentee ballot that doesn't have their own seal stamped on it, they won't issue the ballot. And then here, voter ID is applied for absentee voters. An applicant for an absentee voter ballot must either present identification for election purposes or a copy of identification purposes. We might allow them to also just write their driver's license number on the application or something like that. That was suggested as a way to make it easier for people, because not everyone has access to a copy machine, and they might say, oh, that makes it too hard or something like that. But nonetheless, the intention here is pretty clear. You have to present ID to get your absentee ballot. And if you don't, same as with voting in person, you get a provisional ballot. So here we have the instructions to the voter, and here it says right here in the instructions to the voter. In addition, you must either present an original or a copy of identification for election purposes to the clerk of the city or township in which you are registered, or attach a copy of identification for election purposes to the application. If you do not present or attach identification, you will be issued a provisional ballot that is subject to verification and will not be tabulated on election day. So that's voter ID for absentee ballots. All right, what have we here? More about third-party absentee ballots. The city or township clerk shall only accept an absent voter application from an elector as described in subsection 3, and the Secretary of State is prohibited from sending or providing an absentee voter ballot application to an elector, including but not limited to providing a direct link to an absent voter ballot application on the Department of State website. The Secretary of State can't do voter recruitment there either. People have to actually request their ballots. They can't do ballot solicitations all by themselves. And that's just a basic common sense thing, folks. If you are voting, the presumption that you are making a decision based on caring enough about the outcome of the election to vote is that you actually ask for a ballot. The only reason why they're sending out ballots and applications en masse is to make it so that they can either harvest ballots or steal ballots. So, and fraud either way. In addition, an applicant for an absent voter application must attach a copy of the identification. We covered that already. And what else do we have? If an applicant does not attach identifications, the clerk must issue a provisional ballot. We talked about that already. Let's see here. What else do we have? A lot of pre-existing law. More pre-existing law. Let me just double check. Emergency absent voter. It's the same thing. Present identification, or else get a provisional. Hey, what's up, Shane?
Oh, 1 second, I'll be right back.
Oh, sorry, I just saw your microphone was making some sound. More about provisionals for people without ID. So some things in a bill will have to be said multiple times for various reasons. This is crossing off everything about affidavits, which would no longer be used. They'd be getting provisional ballots instead. That's what all this is. Oh, wait, no, this is some new stuff now. This is the ending of the absentee ballot drop boxes. No need for them, folks. The absentee voter period is 6 weeks. That's absurdly long. And every city and township has at least one clerk's office. Detroit has multiples. So there's no need for absentee ballot drop boxes. They're just an additional point of failure in the chain of custody. So the legislature proposed imposing some security features, making them have video cameras on them, things that have costs. You see, just get rid of them. We don't need them. Nobody needs them. It was all part of the COVID scare. It was all a pretext. They're not necessary, so we just do away with them. Legislature came up with this idea: prohibit cities and townships from providing prepaid postage on absent voter ballot return envelopes, and same for the Secretary of State. Good, that's our tax dollars. If you care enough to vote and you can't vote in person, for the luxury of voting absentee, you can pay for a stamp. Someone says, is it possible for the voting machines to maintain integrity? Can we trust the machines? We will come to the machines in a little bit, but let's keep on going through. We will get to your question about the voting machines. What else do we have here? The full text of the ballot proposal, we covered that already. Dropbox removal again. Let's see here. What else do we have? The clerk of a city or township must record on each absent voter ballot return envelope whether the absent voter ballot return envelope was delivered personally or was delivered by the Postal Service or another public postal service. If the absent voter ballot return envelope was delivered to the post office and does not have a postmark, the city or township clerk must reject that absent voter ballot, and that absent voter ballot must not be counted. So if ballots don't have postmarks, they're not going to count them. And they will note how many they came in through the mail versus how many were delivered in person. And they write on each envelope, so they will know. And anyone who's watching the counting process, we're going to cover that in a moment too. Anyone who's watching the process can ascertain if a ballot does not have a postmark, they cannot count it. Hey, this says it was received in the mail and it's got no postmark on it. Sorry, you can't count it. All right. This is another chain of custody provision. This is a small one. But we have a thing in Michigan called the Ballot Tracker program. And it's optional. We're making it mandatory to have access to the Ballot Tracker program, where if you vote absentee, you can call your local clerk's office and say, hey, did you get my ballot? And they'll tell you if you got it. In fact, working on campaigns typically will FOIA that information every single day from every single clerk in the district that your campaign is operating in. It's called the absentee chase. So these are things that the clerks already have, they're accustomed to, but they should provide them to the public so that you, the individual, can confirm, did you receive my ballot? And when did you receive my ballot? So small thing, but not bad. What else do we have here? Let's see, we're going to keep going. I kind of like when I can scroll through a lot of text because it means we're making good progress here. Okay, here, this is getting back to what I was talking about earlier about security for the absentee ballots that come into the clerk's office. The city or township clerk must keep the ballot return envelopes containing the marked ballots of an absent voter in a container that meets all the requirements for a ballot container described in this section below. So again, don't just leave them in a tray that anyone who has access to the office could intercept. Have them in a locked container, the same as you would treat a ballot at a polling place on election day. Let's see. We're making ongoing a provision that previously only applied to last November's election, which is allowing between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. on the day before election day to perform certain absent voter ballot pre-processing activities. However, what we include here, and we're probably coming to it in just a moment here, is requiring that the signature verification of absentee ballots occur in public meetings that can be video recorded and evidence can be documented there too. So not later than March 1st of every 2 years, the Secretary of State shall provide a written report to the House and Senate committees dealing with elections that contains the following information: how many ballot pre-processing activities they did, how many registered electors they have, how many were voting absentee, how many voted in person on election day, how many absent voter ballots were not returned, number of electors on a permanent absent voter list, if applicable, the number of ballots to be duplicated in each city or township. So providing a report to the legislature, fine, good, transparency. That's all. That's all gravy. Let's get to the big stuff again. The tabulation of absent voter ballots by an absent voter counting board or combined absent voter counting board is subject to Section 801B, which I assume is coming right up here. Let's see. Don't let me forget 801B, because we got other stuff here. Any absent voter counting board, an election inspector, challenger, or poll watcher is authorized to use a camera or video camera to photograph or videotape the proceedings. And again, documenting the evidence. At least 14 days before an election at which an absent voter counting board will be used. The clerk of that city or township must post notice of the meeting location, the time, the date, including but not limited to the date, time, and location that each absent voter ballot counting board will meet to verify signatures on absent voter return ballot or absent voter ballot return envelopes. Like in Oakland County, where you had absent voter counting boards on election day, all the people did there was pull the ballots out of the envelope and put them into a stack and then put them in the tabulation machine. The fraud occurs at the signature verification process. That's where you need to have people watching. The signature doesn't match. This is the same signature on the envelope we just saw a second ago. That's where you need to have signature verification. It's where you need to have watchers. So that's what that's all about. Providing a mechanism for the public to be able to verify that they're actually verifying the signatures in the prescribed manner. The time and location at which the signature verification process described in this section must be open to election challengers and poll watchers. And again, this is all about transparency. Just to catch up on some of the comments here, I apologize for not addressing these questions. Can I photograph my ballot? Janice, I believe they recently changed that law. The answer used to be no. And I think they allowed it, they called them ballot selfies. Originally, the idea was you wanted to be illegal to take a photograph of your own ballot because that might be a problem of voter coercion, voter intimidation, a husband commanding his wife to vote a certain way and take a picture of it, etc. You know, that type of thing. People today don't care anymore. They've done away with that provision. I believe they have, called ballot selfies, because people are taking them now, and they're not intending to be sweeping in people that are just innocently taking pictures of their ballot because they're proud of how they voted. And again, this goes to the arguments that the left will make, accusing this of being voter intimidation. It's absolute, utter nonsense. They don't care anymore. All day long in Detroit, people were showing me their ballots. Nobody cared. So, what else do we have in the comments here? Laws don't matter when Democrats don't obey them and our corrupt government refuses to enforce them equally. While they matter a lot less, it doesn't mean they shouldn't be improved. There are remedies. They don't always succeed. The system does not always work. It doesn't mean you can just sit back and say, well, the whole system is broken. I mean, if that's what you're thinking, realize how it benefits the other side for you to think that. The left wants you to think that, folks. They want you to think your vote counts for nothing, so you don't campaign, so you don't vote, so you don't knock on doors, you don't do the shoe leather work of changing our country by changing people's minds and showing people what's going on in the real world. You have to balance the injustices that we have seen happening day after day after day with the hope you must maintain, because, you know, part of the operation is breaking people's confidence, breaking people's trust in society, breaking people's morale down. They want you to be miserable, they want you to be depressed, and they want you to think it's all hopeless. Because then why would you get involved in any of the campaigns? Which we need to win if we're going to roundly reject the most incredible deprivation of liberty that our country has ever experienced. So I hope we have a successful election in 2022. That's why we're trying to change the policy. That's why we're trying to recruit organizations into the coalition. That's why we're trying to help people build local organizations, because we can't afford to drop the ball on this, guys. That's why we're called Rescue Michigan. We're in an emergency. We're in an existential crisis in our society. So I understand there's a lot to be upset about. I understand they do everything they can to cheat. But when you start thinking your vote counts for nothing, that there's nothing you can do, That's a dangerous attitude. The better attitude is what Robert Barnes says when he files appeals to the Supreme Court. He says, yeah, I don't think we're going to win, but I want to keep banging on that door. I want their clerks to read my briefs. I want my clerks the clerks to read my arguments. I want to keep speaking up and speaking out as often as I possibly can, because sooner or later they might hear some of these cases. I mean,
and let me interject there for a minute.
Yes.
One of the things that kind of shows how you can win by losing is Laura Loomer. She keeps filing lawsuits against big tech. All of them have been dismissed. One of them was considered briefly by the Supreme Court, but then they dismissed it. While that looks like losses, however, her putting the ideas out there and her lawyers putting the ideas out there in the ether that these big tech giants are not market entities, they are more like monopolies or utilities, something to that effect. And Section 230 protects them too much. That's what the issue was about. But she put the idea out there, and then now Justice Clarence Thomas is championing that and making the arguments for that in legal briefs. So by putting ideas out there, you can make change. Even if you don't win a campaign, you can have effects that will kind of cascade through the political system. And it's all local. Obviously our federal reps, our state reps, even probably our county commissions and local government, they are, very corrupt in many instances. They won't say anything about voter fraud. It's very frustrating. But the only way you're going to get them to acknowledge these things is by putting the heat on them at a local level. And all politics is local, as Tip O'Neill said. That's one of the most true maxims there are out there. And you can get involved locally, and there are more angry people now than ever before, and you can rally them. Most of them want something to do, and you can get them on to Rescue Michigan and do whatever initiative you want off of this website, whether it's on voter fraud or anything else. So it's all out there. It just we need to be the ones who get the ball rolling. And once we reach out to those people, we bring them out. We show others that it's okay to speak out, that it's not something that's going to hurt you or kill you. Once there's enough people who are standing up, all this cancel culture BS and all their mob tactics are moot instantly. So we just have to be the ones who do it. So don't be discouraged, because there are tens of millions of people out there ready to fight. We just have to be the ones to get it going.
Right on. All right, I just noticed the time, and we've been going for quite a while. So let's try to plow through the rest of this here, folks, and then I'll come back and answer some more of your comments here. What else do we have? I think it looks like we're getting kind of low, but there's gonna be something. Okay, let's talk about the tabulators. Right here. Prohibit them from being capable of being connected to or operating on the internet. Period, paragraph. That right there is one of the biggest things about the black box voting machines, is not letting them go on the internet at all. The other thing is, how are you sure? How can you be sure that the machines are counting the votes properly? Well, one way is when there is a recount. And I was involved in the recount once in 2016, I think it was. 2016. And we looked at all the ballots, and they matched up. There's no question those machines in that recount counted the ballots correctly. The only times there was any discrepancies are when people put a mark on the ballot that should not have invalidated the ballot, but made it that the machine couldn't read it. For example, if you cross off one candidate that's already been bubbled in and then bubble in another, that would be an overvote. But the machine would count it as an overvote, but it shouldn't. It should be counted as a vote for the one that was not crossed off. That was all that happened. And let me point out, because we're going to be talking about audits, and we're going to be talking about recounts in a moment. But the important thing to understand about an audit is that if a machine is somehow flipping votes and there is a recount, somehow a person would have to deliver exactly the same number of ballots being flipped. And that would be very, very hard to do. That would be logistically extraordinarily hard to do, because they'd have to do that without getting caught in every single precinct where they were doing it. And now you're talking dozens of precincts for a state house race, even hundreds for a congressional race. You would have to have somehow a coordinated campaign where exactly the same number of paper ballots were stolen as electronic ballots were stolen. And that is logistically impossible. So as long as there is a robust recount process, if they are counting the ballots again and they see that there's a major discrepancy, then that's going to immediately call into question everything else that's happening with those machines and everywhere else. In Antrim County, they instantaneously found that the machines had counted them completely improperly, and that has led to an ongoing lawsuit, which I don't know how closely you all are watching this, but the judge this past week allowed more discovery to proceed in Antrim County, so we are pleased to see that case proceeding, and we hope they get to the bottom of what exactly happened with those voting machines, and could it have happened elsewhere. But the important thing is that we create a process for a recount. So, and we'll talk about that in a moment, because I'm just looking at what we have on the screen here, and now there's something else going on. Let's see what this does. Any precinct, absent voter, county board location where votes are tabulated is authorized to, okay, more about allowing cameras and video cameras. So you're allowed to videotape the proceedings, everything except for the personal identification of an elector. And you're not allowed to impede an election inspector, challenger, or poll watcher while videotaping or doing that. This came from a legislative bill, so good for them for that. Again, transparency, allowing there to be a visual, audio-visual representation of what happened that a court can consider. Section 801B, this looks like it's doing the same kind of thing. You have more about video coverage. Okay, this allows for the clerks themselves to provide video coverage. So the county, city, or township must make the recording. If they're going to make recordings, they have to make it available on the public website. Secretary of State can make recordings. So individuals can make recordings. Poll watchers can make recordings. Election challengers can make recordings. The Secretary of State can make recordings. All these things are in the name of transparency. And now here, in the name of preserving evidence, all ballots used in any primary or election may be destroyed after. We're extending the deadline from 1 month to 6. So it used to say 30 days, now it says 180. So that records are preserved. Let's see here. The affidavit, we were removing the affidavits altogether. That's why that was crossed out. We talked about that already. The canvassing period. Let's talk about the canvassing period for a moment here. Extending it from 2 weeks to 3 so that they have more time to make a proper conclusion. And now with respect to what happened in Detroit, where they certified the election under extreme duress. So we say the canvassers shall not certify the election if more than 5% of the precincts are out of balance by more than 1 vote. And we're going to talk a little bit about how Detroit was making precincts just a little bit out of balance for a certain reason. But the important thing is, if a lot of precincts are unbalanced, you can't certify the county. And further down, we also say if they complete, here we go, if they complete their canvass and someone affirms that they made the certification under duress, they can rescind it. Remember what happened a day after the Wayne County Board of Canvassers certified the election? The Republicans both said, we want to remove, it was made under pressure. We shouldn't have done it. We didn't know what we were doing. We want to rescind certification. The commie punks laughed about the fact that they had no recourse. Tough shit, the Secretary of State said. Didn't say it quite like that, but ha ha ha, you can't take it back. We're moving on. No, we say here, if you've made certification under duress because the mob was knocking down your door, you can still rescind certification. So there's that. Have here. All ballots used at a primary general election must be retained and may only be destroyed after 180 days. So there's plenty of time for evidence to be considered. And now going back to the machines, talking about recounts. What we have here is to allow each political party, each county party, to pick one precinct, one race, where they can call for a recount. So now think about the mechanics of how a machine could be used to rig an election. If after the election, one precinct, which you don't know which precinct because they won't choose it until after the election, any one precinct is going to be recounted, and you don't know which one it's going to be. Well, now your algorithm has a problem because whichever precinct it is, if you have altered the results of that voting machine somehow, the recount's going to find it. And that makes it a lot harder for them to somehow electronically hack into the machines and change what the results are. But there is the issue of whether or not a precinct is recountable. And we are going to address that, I think, right about now. So let's see. Here we go. Yes, this is there's a lot of language on this, but what we're doing is saying if a precinct is not recountable because it's out of balance or the seal is broken, right now the current law is you can't recount that precinct, period. And the reason why you wouldn't want to recount the precinct is because if the seal is broken on a ballot box, well, what happens if someone stuffs in a bunch of additional ballots, right? And that makes sense, but the problem is that what Detroit seems to have been doing, because, you know, it would be racist to say they were just completely incompetent because they were 70% out of balance in the August primary last year. I think 40% out of balance in the general election last year. It'd be racist to say that that was out of gross incompetence. So if there was another reason, the reason might be that if the totals are off, if they're out of balance by just one vote, the precinct is declared unrecountable. And now you got a problem because whatever is on those ballots, we'll never know. The precinct has been deemed unrecountable. So what we change here is to allow for what's called an informational recount. And what that means is that if there are new results, the recount wouldn't automatically trigger the results to be counted, but if it comes to a court case, a judge can consider it. And a judge can choose the proper remedy for the situation. So, for example, let me see if I can find you. So here we say, and also being off by only one ballot is not big enough of a difference to make a precinct unrecountable, because that's what most of them were in Detroit, was off by one. So if they suddenly turn out to be off by two, then something funny's happened. But if they're off by only one, that's not enough to make a precinct unrecountable. And if the number of ballots to be recounted in the precinct is does not match and the difference is more than one ballot, that precinct can be recounted for informational purposes. And that informational recount cannot be used to change the result of the election except by a court of competent jurisdiction. So that is how the truth can be known. At least the truth about what's in that ballot box will be known. Doesn't mean it automatically applies, but it means a court could apply it. And at the very least, the public will know. Next here we have, all the rest of this is about informational recounts. So we've done to prevent things from happening with the machines is some precincts can be recounted. And also, you know, candidates and campaigns can request recounts too, if it's close. Counties can now recount any precinct they want. A hacker would not be able to know which recount would be, where the recount would be conducted, so they couldn't just not hack that place. And again, the machines could not be connected to the internet, period. So substantial policy changes to prevent the electronic manipulation of ballots. What else do we have here? Let's see. I think we're still just updating language to remove the prohibition on recounts here. We're still talking about informational recounts, not recountable. Okay. All right, we're getting to the very bottom here, folks, so we're just about ready to wrap up, and then we can start looking at your questions, but here we go. An election official shall not accept from an individual or entity, directly or indirectly, any of the following: gifts of money or goods for the administering of an election. It is a felony to accept money for an administration of an election. And likewise, the state, department, agency, commission, boards cannot accept gifts of money for any election-related activity. So, total prohibition on private financing of public elections. And that's where this document ends. So before we take some questions, and I see there are some questions in chat, I want to talk about where we are in this process right now. The next thing is going to be getting buy-in from the major entities that are going to be supporting this. And we are still in discussions. Yes, I've talked to Mary and Sheridan. Yes, we'll be talking with the Amistad Project. Yes, we'll be talking to attorneys of the state party so that we all come to the same page. We all are in this together. We can't have 3 or 4 different competing citizen-initiated laws to change the election. It would be a mess. But all of us have a common interest in fair and free elections. And if there's going to be any paring down from what we have here, the only reason would be if we conclude that some of these elements are not as important as making sure that we can overcome the objections that we know the other side will make claiming that people didn't know what they were signing when they signed the petitions. There are some elements that we did not talk about in the proposal here that we may want to add, and that is where we have, I think we are in the process of meeting with some very high-powered attorneys who are experts in election law to talk about things like legal remedies, standing. How can we force the courts to hear these cases? We saw there were a lot of ways that courts were employing to ignore litigation. It's like Robert Barnes put it best. He said, it's unripe in spring, standing in summer, latches in fall, mootness in winter. And the courts are repeatedly refusing to hear these cases. So there are some policies that we're going to have to get right here, and we are still in that process. William says, I have no faith in the Michigan Republican Party. I know where you're coming from, buddy. I've been involved in politics for 10 years or 13 years now, just about. And I know where you're coming from. It is the norm, not the exception, that their party is a welfare office for lazy consultants. That being said, I have confirmed the party is highly interested and motivated in election integrity, and we will be talking to them and making sure that what they propose, because they are interested in putting money into this and making it possible, and that's a good thing. It is critical that we get the policy right, and we see eye to eye on this, because they don't want to have volunteers going out collecting signatures for a petition that's going to be criticized and attacked. We all understand we need to thread a needle here and get the policy right. And that's going to be something that's going to have buy-in from the activists, from the grassroots, buy-in from the state lawmakers, and buy-in from the donors. And that is where things are now. And again, it is absolutely critical that we take our time on this. It'll be about a 6-month period. We have a 6-month period. I think we'll probably get it done in 3 to collect the signatures. We need to get this sent to the legislature in a veto-proof bill. And it doesn't have to take effect until the next election, which is in November of the next year. So we have time yet. We are not in a rush to get this out the door. I know we all want to hit the doors right now and start collecting signatures, but we have to take the time to get the policy right. That's what our approach has been. That's what it's going to continue to be. We want to hear your recommendations. I've got some from the conference yesterday, and I know some others are preparing more from me. So please do weigh in. We want your opinions. We don't want to leave good policies behind. We don't want anything in here to be a bad policy. We don't want there to be any loopholes left open. So that's why we're having these weekly calls. We want to be totally transparent with you guys. We want to show you what we have in the legislation. We want your feedback. We want your input. We want your support. So with that, I think we should maybe take some questions. And it's been a little over an hour and a half. I'd sure love to be finished by 10, but Shane, I've been talking for a long time. My throat is dry. Do you have anything you'd like to share about all this stuff?
Yeah, just, I understand how infuriating it is, where you have to be patient. We cannot, get out there and fight back as things worsen, seemingly, exponentially by each passing day, it's getting worse. So it's just wild what's going on, but we have to keep our wits about us. We can't, people are, not thinking rationally. We have to think rationally. We have to maintain our heads about us, because, like I said earlier, we're that beacon of light that's going to, be shine the way for others, so that we can have our liberty moving forward. So please stick with us, and we're doing what we can to get the best possible reform imaginable. And if you have any, comments or questions or anything like that, just let us know. We'll do our best to be responsive. But yeah, it's just that we have to think rationally. You have to keep a cool head, because if we're overreacting or if we are acting out of emotion, we're going to make mistakes. And as we saw in the lead up to the election last year, and then in the fight afterwards to stop the steal, so to speak, a lot of mistakes were made, and our enemies really seized on those mistakes, and it put us in a big hole. So we're going to have to dig our way out of this hole, and we got to do it by being smart.
Yep, absolutely. And by the way, we have a blog at rescuemichigan.com, And I just posted this last night. This video, it's under the recommended reads section. So if you go to articles, there's different categories under recommended reads. There's this video I posted from Viva Fry is his name. And oh, my screen is so narrow that it's there's the video. What's going on in Canada, which is to the left of where we are. And it is absolutely terrifying. They are under total lockdown, martial law, police state, lunacy, neighbors snitching on neighbors. You think we've got it bad? You should watch this little video, folks. And this is where we're going to be tomorrow if we don't fight back. So, again, it's tough to have hope in these times, but you must. Somebody in the comment, We the People, says, what are the signatures for? This is for the election reform, citizen-initiated law. If we collect signatures, we can pass a law that is not subject to the governor's veto. How many signatures does it take? The magic number is 340,000, but that requires you have to go over that because some signatures will be determined to be invalid. So I think a target will probably be 500,000. That's what Unlock Michigan did. And they collected 500,000 signatures in, I think, less than 3 months' time. So it certainly can be done, and it's going to get easier and easier the more we do it. In fact, we may want to do a citizen-initiated law on Unlock Michigan Part 2, knocking out the public health code that the governor's been using to reinstate the lockdowns, which is the last leg she has to stand on for doing that. Rich Alias Dude says, Whitmer is evil. I will never wear a mask. I am with you, buddy. Last time I wore a mask was when I went to my dentist's office about a month and a half ago. I will not wear them in public. I will not wear them to go to a restaurant. And to see people wearing them outdoors is just a reminder of how incredibly gullible and pathetic so many people are. And it is tragic to see. Let's see. Someone asked about if we can collect signatures electronically because of the COVID stuff. There is no legal way to do that. Not without changing the law, and they're not going to allow that. There's too many security hazards with the internet. And if you had an online petition, it'd be too easy to hack. It'd be too easy for there to be problems with it. There are very rigorous requirements as to the form of a written petition. There are two kinds of petitions, folks. There's the legally binding petition, like a citizen-initiated law, a ballot proposal. Those are where you have to collect signatures from registered voters, turn them into the Secretary of State, and what have you. And then there's less formal petitions, like write your member of Congress and tell them to vote no on H.R. 1 or something like that. And those are also petitions, but they're not legally binding. And those are what most online petitions are. Although, to be honest with you, quite often an online petition is really just a way for someone to capture your email address. And whether or not those petitions are actually being delivered, I guess goes back to our discussion earlier about what groups you trust. So, yeah, be careful what you sign out there, folks. Let's see. Lemon James says, my suggestion is that we implement the policy of hand counting boards. Well, the problem with that is that you have to remember when you are tabulating ballots, you're not just tabulating one campaign, one race, one vote. You're tabulating dozens of races, or at least a dozen races. In the general election last year, I remember some people at the polling place took like a half hour to cast their ballot because there was a race for 13 court judges, and there were 13 candidates, and it said vote for no more than 13. Well, guess what? Even though it was not a contested race, every one of those ballots had to be counted. So the time it would take to count by hand every single ballot would be very, very difficult. And you also have to remember that people aren't all that reliable either. I don't know if the people at the TCF Center who were managing that process would be trustworthy to hand count ballots. I don't think it's fair to say that because some machines can be hacked, no machines can be used. There are all kinds of ways to ensure that a system is secure. You know, banks have security systems. Websites have security systems. The challenge is making sure that the election has a secure process that a machine can be trusted. And part of that is verification. So there are ways that machines can be used, and that process has to be corrected. But I think if you talk about going back to the total hand counting of ballots, you've got first logistical problems, and second, the problem that, again, elections are an adversarial process, and people aren't necessarily more trustworthy than a machine. let's see. Governor Whitmer and her HHS director are totally fascists, telling parents that their 2-year-old to 4-year-old must wear a mask at all at daycare. Yeah, that is absolutely disgusting and morally obscene. And it is incredible to see these so-called experts just totally disregard not just common sense, but things that have been shown by expert studies that, for example, young children need to see faces. It's how they learn, it's how they socialize. And of course, young children, science says they can spread the illness, but they don't really catch the illness. So you are punishing young children for something that does not harm them directly. It's absolutely disgusting. It's atrocious. And yeah, Joni Caldoon, I remember before the COVID thing started, she tried to declare that it was a health emergency that we ban vaping products because young people were having their lungs were caving in from the vaping products. And of course, all the cases of serious lung complications from vaping products were linked to illicit marijuana products that contain vitamin E acetate, not tobacco vaping. So much for science on that. But she declared it an emergency to go around the legislature to ban flavored vaping products. Absolutely nonsense. And incidentally, just as one of the big tobacco companies was planning to launch their own alternative vaping product. Gee, wonder what happened there. Now, these people are partisan hacks. They've been acting in bad faith, and they need to be confronted as such. And if you're running for office or you're out knocking on doors, don't be shy to tell the truth about these people. All right. Greg, statistics say most COVID victims wore masks regularly. Well, yes, and you know, the obvious point, Michigan has had the biggest lockdowns or among the biggest lockdowns, and it still has the worst statistics. So what's going on there? Anyway, folks, I see a lot of comments about COVID, and we could talk about this all night. My throat is getting pretty sore. We're coming on 2 hours. I've gone through a lot of legislation. I'm not used to talking about this. Robert says, good Viva Fry video. Robert Barnes is great. Yes, and again, folks, we all have our favorite media sources, and I use our blog to share some of my favorite sources, so feel free to check that out. Yeah, Robert Barnes is great, and we might be talking to him a little bit about our legislation too, by the way. So what else do we have here? All right, well, I see some comments in the chat. I see a lot of comments in the chat. I am exhausted, folks. I think we might end up doing more of these. Our original plan was to do once a week, and we had one past Saturday. We were doing them on Saturdays. We did one today because yesterday we were at the Save Our State conference. And I feel like there's a lot that's happened this past week that we haven't had time to go over. There was the hearing on the Antrim County lawsuit last Monday. There was, people are talking about a lot of different issues. There's Governor Whitmer proposing permanent rules to mandate masks. Just so y'all know, that can be at least delayed for a very long time by the legislature. And again, this is breaching a whole new topic here, but maybe next time we'll talk about JCAR. Maybe I'll do a video. I made 2 videos last week, and there were so many things were happening. I never actually posted them on the site, so I got to get back and doing that. Renee says, why are we trusting Benson to verify signatures on the last petition? They are almost done verifying them now. There's going to be some news on that very soon. There was a delay that was probably not proper. However, because we had the good problem of having the Michigan Supreme Court strike down the law that the Unlock Michigan was repealing, we have a good problem that is the issue is kind of moot. That's not to say we shouldn't have the signatures counted, but it's to say that at the least Unlock Michigan, their lawyers might have looked at that and said, you know, we could file a lawsuit, but the court might say, we've already had the bill struck down. We've already had the law struck down. So it's not much of a remedy we could provide you other than maybe declaratory relief. And again, this is technical legal mumbo jumbo, I know. But the petitions are being counted. I know there was a delay. We have in our proposal that there needs to be less of a delay possible. But nonetheless, it is progressing. And so they will be counted. And there is, by the way, going to be a hard deadline of next July for her to verify the signatures on any citizen-initiated law that we do this year. So she will not be able to push this delay past the next election. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. We appreciate all the comments. We appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate the support. We couldn't do it without you. So for those of you who've contributed, thank you very much. Tonight is actually, this is the last night that David Dudenhofer, the dude, is going to be matching your contributions. So if you'd like to support Rescue Michigan, please contribute, because tonight is the last night those donations will be doubled. So thank you all for all the work that you're doing. And next week, we'll probably have more to talk about with some of the tools on our website that we're building. In fact, yes, let's end on this. We built a tool that's not quite ready for prime time just yet, but it might be good to show you right now because it is available, and that is our online forum. So we showed this last week. There's not a lot of people were in the call last week, and I haven't had time this past week to get some of the updates to it that I wanted to get to. But at the grassroots headquarters on the main page, when you sign into our website, we have these different tools you can use. And if you scroll down, there's one at the bottom called, it says Forum. There's a nice picture of a gun show there. And the forum, let me make this fit my screen here. Hold on. It's actually a user forum where you can make posts and comment on other people's posts. So for each comment, you can upvote and downvote the post. You can say if you like it or don't like it. You can reply to someone's post. So you see there's some comments in here. I know we have work to do here, guys, to make it prettier, to make it more easy to read, and we're working on it. But one of the problems with launching an online forum, and see this guy, I got to do something to correct. I have to put a default image there, so I'm still debugging it. But one of the problems is when you share someone, hey, go to our forum and start posting, is that until there starts to accumulate a certain number of posts, people don't feel like there's any reason to post anything because there's nobody here. So getting a social network off the ground, as you will, is really tough to do. And I don't mean to call this a social network. This is more of an action network. We're not here to just post about our day and, you know, share pictures of our dogs and things like that. This is an action-oriented, threaded discussion where people can, for example, go to our state legislation forum and start keeping track of different bills moving through the state legislature so that 1,000 local grassroots organizations aren't all tracking the same committees, aren't all tracking the same bills. So please take a moment, folks, if you're watching this, sign up for RescueMichigan.com. Even if you haven't paid the $35 to acquire your voter file, it's free to start creating posts on the forums. We may, at some point, if we get opposition coming in and trying to mess with it, have to lock that down. But for right now, it's open. So please, if you haven't already done so, sign up at RescueMichigan.com. It doesn't cost anything. And then log in, create a profile picture for yourself. Let us know where you're from, and start posting so that when we have the site ready for prime time in the online forum, that there'll be a lot for new people coming in for the first time to be able to see it and see a lot of discussions they want to get involved in. So with that, folks, we're coming to just under 2 hours. So it's been a great conversation. We've gone through a whole lot of material. I hope we have a lot of good news to share with you all for next week. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. It's been a great discussion. We've had a very exciting past week, both with meeting with some high-powered people on getting some of the details of the policy, right? Getting the new plan in hand, going to the State of Our State conference, and now getting to share it all with you tonight. So thank you all for watching. Stay with us. We'll be back next week, and hopefully we'll have some more videos and articles and other things to share with you through the course of next week. So thanks, everybody. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you all have a great week. And till next time,